Bom dia, boa tarde. Welcome to another episode of the PortugueseSoccer.com podcast. I'm your host, John Neves, back here again to talk about my favorite subject, your favorite subject, and that is, of course, Portuguese soccer, Portuguese football, whatever word you use in your part of the world. Episode 286, two parts to this episode. The first part will be my usual reviewing and previewing the happenings and the news and the results of Portugal and abroad. And then my second part of this episode, and I got to be honest with you, I'm very, very excited about it. I had an opportunity to interview, and I appreciate the time that he gave me, Mauro Eustaquio. Mauro played in Portugal for various clubs in the third and fourth tier, even spent some time in the districts. He came to Canada and played professionally, including with Ottawa, which is where I saw him once play in a cup final. And now he's a manager of York United FC of the Canadian Premier League. And he has gone from basically being a professional player to now managing, and he also was the youngest first-team manager in North America. So, and yes, if you're wondering about his last name, that is correct. That is his brother that plays for Futebol Clube de Porto, and we had a chance to touch on a few things about his brother and really what it takes to play for a club like Porto. It's not just talent alone, it's also character, and we had a chance to talk about that. So we also talked about what it's like to be a manager, and you know, he also took his club last spring to Nazaré for preseason, and that was a lot of fun to talk. So if you're in Toronto, especially in Canada, you want to listen to this because not only I think is there a great league that's going on there, but it's a great chance to listen to someone Portuguese who's very well accomplished at different levels. So that'll be coming up in the second part of this episode. But let me just go through what I usually do week to week. And next week I will be having a guest co-host with me, one of my listeners. Again, if you're listening to this for the first time or you've heard me say it and you've decided to take it up, I always invite any of my listeners to come on with me and guest co-host an episode. And next week I will have somebody that will be with me. He's also, by the way, from Canada. So I'm looking forward next week to having a guest co-host. And you know who you are. We'll talk next week. But let's just go quickly reviewing and previewing the past week. First off, Benfica and Fenerbahce played to a 0-0 draw. Got a little bit scary for Benfica earlier today. I'm recording this on Wednesday night. We saw, of course, Florentino was sent off with about 19 minutes left. Bruno Lage made a few adjustments, and basically Benfica walks away from Istanbul with a 0-0 draw. So it is all to play for next week in the Estádio da Luz, and that should be a second leg, especially involving the special one, Mourinho. I think that's going to be very special to see, and that's a big-time match next week. A lot riding on the line, not just because of the prestige of having another Portuguese club in the Champions League, but I could tell you with the elections coming up at the end of October, Rui Costa needs to be in the Champions League. Otherwise, the cat calls for him to be replaced with 5 other people, including Luis Felipe Vieira, who announced his candidacy. That's the way it is in Portugal. You're as good as your most recent results. So big-time match happening with Benfica. On Thursday, Braga will be playing Lincoln Red Imps, a club from Gibraltar, that plays in Algarve Stadium. So Braga is going away for the first leg, but they don't have to leave Portugal. They're going to be playing at Algarve Stadium against this team. On paper, you would say that Braga is heavily favored, but considering that this team and you know, Gibraltar doesn't have a great history, but nevertheless, here they are in the playoff round. I think you got to be very, very careful. And then we also saw Santa Clara. They'll be playing their playoff against Shamrock Rovers. And that should be a very interesting match, playing against one of the better sides from Ireland. So, again, still a lot of ways to go here. Hopefully all 3 Portuguese clubs will be advancing to the group stage. Quick look at what's happening, first off, with match day 3 coming up this weekend. One quick note, Estoril Praia, Santa Clara, they will not be playing this weekend. Santa Clara have requested that match be moved to September the 6th in order to allow Santa Clara to concentrate on these 2 legs against the Shamrock Rovers. Again, we saw Benfica do the same thing, moving their match from Rio Ave to later in September, and that enabled Rio Ave to play Cristiano Ronaldo's team in a friendly, also in Algarve Stadium. How many times am I going to say that? That's become like the stadium in Europe that gets to play all these different matches. But this weekend they are not playing. Everything gets going. No matches on Friday. 4 matches on Saturday in the Primeira Liga. Benfica is at home to Tondela. Of course, newly promoted Tondela, great manager last season, Pinto, who's now at Vitoria Guimarães. Sporting will be making the tricky trip to Madeira to play at Nacional. I'm sure we'll hear jokes about the weather, but that's a very interesting match. And then we also have a bit of a derby between Moreirense and Vitoria Guimarães. On Sunday, Porto will be at home to Casa Pia and Braga. I'm surprised Braga didn't request to move this match to another time, but they'll be playing AVS and the 2 teams from up north. And then we'll have one match on Monday with Estrela Amadora against newly promoted Alverca, which is having a bit of a rough time since being promoted. But Estrela Amadora will be playing Alverca. Second division this weekend. Everything gets going on Friday. Yes, there is a Friday match that will be playing at the primetime hour of 2015. Chaves against Felgueiras. You've got 3 matches on Saturday. Portimonense at home against Vizela. Passos de Ferreira at home against Leiria. And, of course, my favorite club in the second division from Torres Vedras, Torreense, taking on Académico de Viseu. Of course, as we know, all the big 3 clubs have B teams now in the second division. Porto B will be at home to Feirense. Sporting will be going to make the trip back up north. Sporting undefeated, by the way, along with Vizela sitting at the top. They'll be playing Oliveirense. And on Monday, Benfica will be making the trip to play Lusitania de La Rosa. An interesting story with them, and again, one of the teams that were promoted. And again, that's your schedule for the first and second division. Other things in Portuguese football, of course, as we all know, the big 3 have, they're taking care of business like everyone expected them to. Sporting, I had expressed some concern that perhaps maybe they, based off of the preseason form, that, would they have a hard time scoring? Well, they certainly answered that last week, putting 6 goals last week, scoring, and that was a pretty big result. So I think they've proved me wrong there. But interesting also, Famalicão last week had a home match, and their manager was not very happy about having to play on a Saturday afternoon. In Portugal, of course, the weather is hot. Unfortunately, Portugal is dealing, and it seems to be getting worse, with no relief in sight, and that is, of course, the forest fires. And, he was talking about the manager of Fama about how, they tell everybody to stay indoors, stay away from the bad air with the smoke, and yet here they are having a match in Rio Maior. And that really caught a lot of people's attention, not because of the criticism, but because what he was saying about that they still went ahead, and he questioned the TV decisions in this thing. So that was very interesting news last week with Famalicão. We also saw, by the way, Rio Ave last week got to play in their stadium. There was a bad storm last spring in Portugal. I forgot the name, something depression, and it destroyed part of their roof, and they had to eventually go play at Passos de Ferreira. But Rio Ave this past weekend played to a 1-1 draw at home in Nacional, and they finally got to play back in their own stadium. Other news before we get to the big interview with Mauro, Luis Felipe Vieira has announced his candidacy for Benfica president, so now there are 6 total people running, and of course everyone is really looking to take down the current king of Benfica, which is of course Rui Costa. And Luis Felipe Vieira did an interview with TBI and CNN Portugal and had a lot of harsh words to say. He even said that there's apparently a big economic problems coming to Benfica that wait until people see it. So again, you don't know if it's just let me tell you something. People love football. But people also in Portugal are very political, and politics is a very big thing in Portugal. And sometimes some of that attitude gets brought into football. And I know that is let me tell you, these next 2 months, the amount of criticisms, accusations, allegations, he's not fit for the job, it's going to only pick up. And Rui Costa better put on his metal armor, because it is going to get very, very tough. We saw last week Jorge Jesus win his opener with his club in Saudi Arabia, thanks to a João Felix goal that was assisted by Cristiano Ronaldo in the Saudi Super Cup, the semifinals. They advanced to the final. We saw Porto goalkeeper. I don't know what's going on here, but Galatasaray offered 20 million. I can't even believe that they would offer that. That's, obviously, I'm sure that when that arrived via fax machine or email, his assistant probably didn't even take it to Villas-Boas. He probably declined it because a player like, first of all, why Costa is still at Porto remains a mystery to me, because I would have thought by now he would have been due for a big move, and he is deserving of it. But Costa, only 20 million from Galatasaray in the recent report, they were going to improve on it. Well, unless they plan to at least double that offer, I can't imagine what improving means, but that made some news. Ivan Jaime, of course, you remember him a few years ago with Familia Kong. He was supposed to be the next biggest thing, the type of player coming from a smaller club that gets to play for a big club. Never worked out with Porto. He's now going to go play in North America in Major League Soccer with the Montreal Impact. So he's going to be making a loan move. So we'll see what happens with that. We saw Andre Silva. He's a player that's starting to bounce around now in Europe. If you remember him, first when he helped FC Porto B win the second division title, got to play in the first division, did well with the main senior club, and then, of course, made the surprising move to AC Milan. And he's had his moments. He's done very well, but it just feels like every year he's kind of dropping a level. And so I thought that was interesting. And obviously also this weekend, Rodrigo Mora saw some action this weekend. He came in as a sub, but again, a situation. He was one of their best players last year, and somehow he's in a rotation when you would think that a player like that would need to be in a rotation, but that seems to be what's going. Futsal news, Ricardinho, our Pele, our Cristiano, our Messi in futsal. One, I think, player of the world 6 times. He announced his retirement. Big time player. Some people always wonder what it would have been for him to play in the first division if he ever had the chance. But I got to tell you, the way he could play with that ball in an indoor facility was legendary, and there's no doubt that one of Portugal's very own is certainly one of the best all time, and it's going to be hard to beat that because he's really, really that good. So just to kind of mention that. Going to end it here with my club, Atlético dos Arcos, like I always do, ending it, although we still have the interview with Mauro coming up. Not really much to say. They've got about 2 weeks left before they begin their season against Medellín. Again, if you're brand new to this podcast, I always talk about them last. Last year, they made the move to the 4th tier. Unfortunately, they wound up being relegated, and now they're back in the districts. They seem to have a better team this year. It seems like there's some investment going on because the goal is to eventually get right back up. So not really a lot of news other than the fact that I know recently they did their matchup presentation and they played to a 1-1 draw. But anyway, folks, I'm excited. We're going to be interviewing Mauro Eustaquio coming up here in a few minutes. Talk about Canadian soccer, talk about Portuguese players, talk about his experiences playing in Portugal. It's not all beautiful stuff. You got to work hard. You got to be doing other things, and then we could obviously talk about the success he's having right now. Youngest manager when he was hired of a first division club in North America. And North America, by the way, is a big continent, so that says a lot about the fact that he's the youngest and how many clubs there are. The fact that he's got this distinction, and he's also got this. By the way, he also was on the staff of Canada Soccer for a match between matches against Mexico and USA. That's pretty darn good to be that young and to have already been on the sideline for those matches as an assistant. But anyway, coming up next, as we wrap up the first part of this episode, my next is my interview with Mauro Eustaquio. Bom dia, boa tarde. Welcome to part 2 of the weekly PortugueseSoccer.com podcast. This is, of course, my opportunity every week to interview somebody. And this week, I got a real big-time interview. Someone who is managing at the highest levels. He has played in Portugal and Canada, and I'm going to tell him in a minute where I've seen him play in might have been one of his bigger matches in Canada. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Canadian Soccer League. We're going to talk a little bit about his past experiences in Portugal. And we're also going to talk about basically Canadian soccer and how it's been growing and There's a lot of Portuguese in Ontario and Montreal, that always endeavor. So I'm always interested in hearing someone that's at the heart of managing in Canada, and what other advice he can give to young people that daydream one day about playing in Portugal. I mean, some people, playing in Portugal, but for some people, it's a big deal. So, Mauro, welcome aboard, Mauro Eustaquio. I hope I'm saying that last name right.
Yes, you are. I've heard way less, way worse, but no, you nailed it. Well,
So let me give a quick bio on you. You were born in Portugal. You're from lovely Nazaré. Have you ever seen the beach with this famous waves
yes,
from
yes,
Nazaré?
it's actually something obviously growing up for us. It still is something quite normal. But in the past couple of years, obviously there was a big boom about it. Obviously, there's documentaries that were created. It's a beautiful small town, great food, great people, and obviously the beach and its waves is something magical.
Yeah, and I should also mention when we start talking about he is a manager of York United FC, which plays in the Canadian League. It is based out of Toronto. I believe you play out of what? York University, correct?
Yes, yes. We're out of York University. That's our home base. That's where we train, and that's where we have the games. And again, it's been something that we feel good at. We feel good. The conditions there are top notch. The club does want to progress, and obviously have their own stadium, but only time will tell when that comes.
Well, I could tell you from what I remember in the early days of Major League Soccer, it kind of reminds me of, a lot of people renting the big stadiums and trying to find their own stadiums. And then eventually they did find it. But you're right, it does take time. But you eventually moved to Canada. And then, if, you were back in Portugal, and you played some youth soccer with Nazarenos. You also had some opportunity with Union Leiria. And I'm also seeing here your youth career included Leamington MS.
Yeah, it was actually the Leamington Falcons. That's where kind of where it all started as my dad and some of his friends as coaches. It was a very, I would say, heavy Portuguese based environment. Obviously, we knew everybody. We played together, went to school. Some of us included. We were in Ranchos together, so it was a very familiar environment, and obviously we had the big passion of soccer, so it was good to be around people that we knew and playing the sport that we love.
Yeah, and you got to play professionally. I know you mentioned some of it was semi-pro, but you were with Sporting Pumbal, and then you went to play for the Ottawa Fury, and that's where I saw you play in the NASL final against the Cosmos.
Cosmos,
Do you remember
yes.
that game?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yeah, so it all started obviously as you just mentioned with Union Leiria, which was obviously a big team and still is a big historical team. That's where obviously coaches like Jose Mourinho started his career and did a lot of positive things out there. When I was there, they still had the first team in first division, so I had a lot of experiences and training sessions and friendly games with the first team under coaches like Sapinto, Pedro Caixinha.
Those are good names.
There was a lot of quality there and with players as well, and I was extremely thankful and grateful to be given those opportunities. After that, I got obviously involved through José Dominguez, which is another big name with a
I
big.
remember him sporting
Yeah, yeah,
in Birmingham,
Sporting
if I remember.
Birmingham, exactly, exactly. So a big career and big personality, great coach, and I had the opportunity to be coached by him from my U18s to my U20s, which then came the opportunity to play for Canada Soccer. So I got involved with the U20s and U23s, and that kind of gave me the opportunity to play in which now is the old Segunda B in Pombal. Very high level, very high quality. The players that were in that league were obviously players that had experience in the first division, second division. So it was where I grew a lot and grew very quickly. And then, like you just mentioned, I think my first professional contract was with Ottawa Fury. And I remember that final. It hurt. It was exciting. Two
Yeah,
great teams, obviously. That night, I'm sure you remember, Cosmos had Marco Senna, Raul
yeah.
on it as well, and Roversio, I believe, was on that team too, who played for Gil Vicente, their captain Carlos Mendes. So again, very good team on both sides, a very good league, and it was definitely an experience that I'll never forget.
Yeah, yeah, that's what I remember when I was doing the research, and that was a great game, and it was packed. The stadium was
It
packed,
was.
and they were playing at the old Hofstra University
Yes.
stadium. And then obviously, I know you played for Edmonton, Penn, Calgary, FC, and Caldas. Were you on that Caldas team, or was this after? There was one year where I think they made it to the Final Four, the Taça de Portugal, but was that before?
That was before me. That was before. I came in, I believe it was actually the year right after that. Obviously, Caldas is extremely close
Yeah.
to Portugal. I was recovering from my to Portugal, sorry, to Nazaré. I was recovering from my second ACL injury, and I thought it was best for me to get back in a good environment, playing on grass, playing at a competitive level. So they opened up the doors for me, and it was a great club, great experience.
Let me ask you a question about speaking in Portugal, because we have a lot of people that listen, and I think at one time or another, people have daydreamed about the opportunity to, play in Portugal, whether it be a semi-pro, whether it be at the professional level. And I know like the top two divisions, first and second divisions, are considered to be professional. But I know the third tier, the fourth tier, my hometown club that I talk about a lot on my podcast, Atlético dos Arcos from Arcos de Valverde, they're in the districts. They just got relegated. Um, but I could tell you, as someone who spends a lot of time there, that I see the players walking around, and you wouldn't know that it was, districts. I mean, it's taken very, very seriously. But for our listeners, if you don't mind, tell me like what was a day like to be a footballer, playing for a club like Caldas? I know they have facilities. I know you got to do some traveling on the bus. Can you kind of enlighten us with like what was a day like in Portugal between the time you start and then you go to the facility, and what was that like being a footballer in Portugal?
I took my obviously I took my job, let's call it, extremely, I was dedicated for it. So Galvez was a club, or one of the clubs that trained at night. So a lot of third division clubs, and obviously second and first, they all train in the morning. But a lot of third division clubs have started to train in the morning, but Caldas is still one of the few that train at 6 p.m. So what I did was I looked at the morning kind of as a slow start, going to the gym, getting in my early movements, my morning movements in, and then I just kind of slowly got into a slow paced life. So I would wake up, obviously have breakfast, go for a little morning walk. My parents were around, and then obviously have to spend a lot of time with them. And because I was just away for so long, I had so many years being in North America, that obviously when I went to play for college, a big reason why I did it was to be close to my family. So I spent big portions of the morning and lunches with my family members, and then I just go home, start to rest. And I would like to do a gym session, obviously, before training. Nothing too crazy, but just to maintain the body, obviously, and for me in particular, because I was coming back from my second ACL surgery, I would obviously, I had a couple maintaining kind of the car type of routines that I like to do, I had to do. And that's how my day kind of went. So around 3 o'clock, 3:30, I would head over to the gym. I would do my mobility. I would do my little workout. Around 4:30, 5 o'clock, I would head over to Caldas, which was about half hour drive. Well, obviously, I drove there every day, and then we'd get there at around 6 o'clock. The training session only started at 7:30. From 6 to 6:30, you're with the guys. You're doing whatever kind of just to gel in and connect. Obviously, I spent, again, because of my injuries, I spent a lot of time in the treatment room. Either just to release some muscles, to build others, and then yeah, and then got to training. The negative thing about training at night is I'm a locker room type of guy. I've always been. I like the environment of football. I like the smell and the sense of the locker room. And then how a locker room is. You're with a full of good guys, shits and giggles, and it's a good environment. So I was always one of the first ones to get to the locker room, but also one of the last ones to leave. So my nights at time, I would get home around 10:30, and not ideal, but because I knew my mornings were off, I could eat a little bit later, go to bed a little bit later, but also be extremely professional and respect my body. So that's kind of how my days went. Obviously, on when we had home games, something that is very, and as you know, very traditional in Portugal is teams have lunch together before any game.
Yeah.
So that was something that I always enjoyed. Obviously, being in North America, we'd only have lunch together if we had away games, obviously going to the hotels and whatnot. But that routine of the team getting together in the morning, getting the newspaper, going for a walk, getting lunch, going to the stadium was something that I really enjoyed, and that was obviously how my weekends were spent.
When you were there playing in Portugal, did you have an opportunity to play maybe through regional cups or maybe through the Taça? Was there any opportunity to play against a higher level club? And was that like one of your better memories in Portugal, or it just never worked out when you were there?
Yeah, even for again when I was at Caldas for Taça Portugal, we played against Sporting Covilhã, which at that
Mm.
time was and still is a very high end club. Obviously, up north, very respected as well. We got eliminated by them 3-1 in the cup. I actually scored a goal that game. So it was memorable because again, I wasn't known to be a goal scorer, so I remember all my goals
Yeah.
quite clearly. But yeah, Sporting Covilhã was one of the clubs. We played Alverca, which now is in first division as well. Played against Bulnes as well, and then obviously in my junior years with União de Leiria, we played, if you want to call them the big dogs, pretty much every weekend. The Benfica, Sporting, Porto. We were also a team that would always go into the championship phase, and got to play some intense games with them. Obviously, they were loaded with quality players. Obviously, Bernardo Silva is from my generation, André Gomes,
Mhm.
Ricardo Gai, Ivan Cavaleiros. They all shared the field with me, and it was definitely a great experience.
Yeah, that is. I mean, you were living there, you got to play, you had your life here, but you had your family and you could play. I mean, I think that sounds pretty darn good. And then of course you came back to the States, like you said, you played, and then you decided to basically make your move and become a manager. And I know that I guess you were interim at one point, and then this past season when you were appointed manager of York United FC, as we were talking about this before, you're basically the youngest first team manager in North America. I mean, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was definitely something that I didn't know until obviously the club announced it. I think everything just happened super quick from the minute that I hung up my boots to grabbing a clipboard and some mannequins was literally a changeover of, I want to say, maybe 6 months. So I actually didn't finish the season in Caldas because I got the opportunity. It was between COVID and the pandemic, so it was on
Yeah.
and off. But I got a call from Calvary FC set up, and they're like, "Listen, we obviously know that we have our kind of our academy. It's under a different name, but we want you involved here." And I took the job, so I started coaching U12 boys, and slowly progressed all the way up to the U21s, and kind of was a manager for tier one soccer basically for that club. And while I was in that job, we're talking about, like I said, 6 months. Martin Nash, who had coached me as an assistant at Ottawa Fury with Mark Duchange, who had coached me also at Calvary in 2019 under Tommy Wilden Jr., got the head coach job here at York United. So he called me. I still remember clearly. I was going to Portugal for my summer, for my Christmas holidays, and I was at the airport. And he says, "Listen, Mauro, I have a final call today. I think I'm going to get the job at York. I want you to become my assistant." And it was tough for me because obviously I wanted to go through, kind of the pathway and take it easy in, but it was also, I knew that these opportunities don't come around. I knew Nashi on a personal level. Obviously, he thought of me, so it was a really good opportunity for me, and I took it. I worked with him for 2.5 years. Um, After that last season, he left the club. It came in Benjamin Mora, and 6 months later, Benjamin left the club. So went through the interview process with the ownership here, and they gave me the job, and it's been an extremely rewarding adventure. I'm enjoying every minute, and I'm happy with obviously where the club's going and what we're doing with it.
Yeah, and we were talking about this offline, so I wanted to ask you again, and that is you took your team for preseason to Nazarea, and obviously you're going there in the spring. Teams are, like you said, three-quarters of the way through their season. It's kind of tough. Tell us a little bit about that experience and how well it worked out for you.
It was great. Obviously, we started doing preseason plans in November for us to take off in February, late February, beginning of March, and we had a couple options on top of the table, but I wanted to go into a country that their season was already going, because I wanted obviously competitive games. I wanted to run the boys. I wanted to be able to train in the morning and at night. I didn't want the heat to be something that controlled how our days went. So Europe was always a big one. And I reached out to the city hall and to the clubs in Portugal, and everybody was extremely open to have us there. So it was extremely satisfying to be with my first professional team as a head coach in my hometown, and being able to see the players enjoy where I grew up, and to have extremely competitive games. It was good. I think it's potentially one of the best preseasons I've had as an assistant coach or as a coach, and it was good. We got what we wanted out of it. The guys got a beating with the fitness levels, but they played against very competitive teams. We played against Portuguese U23, which were the champions last year. We played against Portuguese first team. We played against Caldas. So it was competitive. It was good, and I think we learned a lot from it.
Yeah, those are pretty good teams to be playing at that time of the year. They really are. I know about Turians very well.
Yeah.
It's kind of a lot of my relatives live in Torres Vedras, so I know that area pretty well. So tell us a little bit about the league. I know there's 8 teams. Much like in MLS, you guys are doing a lot of traveling, of course. You've got teams out in the West Coast. And I know of the league. It's like you said, it's 8 teams. Tell us a little bit about it. Where does it stand now? It kind of reminds me of the early days of MLS almost. Which, when I say MLS, I'm talking about Major League Soccer. Before late, I always say when they brought in Toronto FC into the league, and all of a sudden Toronto FC was selling out every game, and then they brought in Seattle. That's when Major League Soccer really took off. But in the early days, you had to find your own stadium, you had to build your own fan base. It wasn't easy. What's it like these days? And by the way, Canada, made the last World Cup. It is growing. There's a lot of talent, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But tell us a little bit about the league and how well it's going.
Yeah, so the Canadian Premier League is a league that has been around. This is going into year 7. It's a league that I played in it in 2019 when it first started, and it's I can see definitely the big differences. It's been growing of both infrastructures and quality of players, quality of coaches as well. And it's stable. Obviously, it's not easy to have on an ownership basis. It's not easy to have teams in North America. Like you said, due to the traveling, a lot of times these away games, cost teams over $50,000-$60,000 just for two days. But it's growing. Obviously, now we have partnerships with TSN, and our games are going on nationwide television. There's more and more teams investing not only on the first team, but creating a pathway. Like a team like York United, we have our U21s. We're opening up our U19s next year, and we're building on to have a full base academy, just like a lot of European clubs. Because, like you said, there is a lot of quality in Canada. There is a lot of players. Now they just need that opportunity, and I think the CPL is created to give Canadians opportunities. Because if you thought about it, about 10, 15, 12 years ago, we're looking at Canadian players only really had 3 teams that they can be professionals in. Well, potentially more, because you look at Edmonton and Calgary, and obviously they had a lot more. Edmonton and Ottawa, and there was professional opportunities there, but they never really had an academy. And the big academies were only Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. So it's good to see that it's growing. It's good to see that people are investing not only in first teams, but they're also giving pathways and opportunities for players to develop, and not only players but coaches as well. Because obviously, for you to have those teams up and running, you're going to need qualified coaches, and nowadays coaching is looked like as a profession. It's looked like a job, and that's extremely satisfying to see how serious people are taking it.
Yeah, I was also looking. One thing that's very impressive about the league is the TV. You know, TSN, One Soccer, and there's even games in the States with Fox
Fox.
One, and Fox Sports 2. So that's pretty good, and so that's actually very nice. Let me ask you something also about Canadian soccer. Obviously, I got to tell you, the run up to qualifying for the last World Cup is very exciting for Toronto. Not just, I remember one game actually for the whole country. The Canada played Mexico, and they played them in Edmonton on purpose. It was like, I think, -5 degrees Celsius. There were mounds of snow behind the goals. You know, you thought you were watching a football game. And obviously this was done because the Americans do the same thing. I think they once played Mexico in Denver, and they were playing in a snowstorm. But a lot of that is the psychology of trying to throw the teams off, especially the teams, that play in the much warmer climates. And by the way, your brother was a very big part of that, of course. And, I think a lot of people started looking, and they saw that all of a sudden there's a new generation of Canadian players. And a lot of people wanted, because first of all, it's a big country. It's very influential in the world. And you kind of always sat there like, how is Canada not playing in the World Cup? Like, how is it not possible? I mean, people will cite the weather. They will cite hockey. With all due respect to the Maple Leafs, they just continue to disappoint year after year. Um, People felt there wasn't a niche for it, and now there is. And then obviously, they did qualify for the World Cup. I think they might have finished top of the group, or at least ahead against USA. And by the way, now, Mexico USA was always kind of a match you watch. They would even go out of their way to play friendlies because there was money to be made with tickets. Now all of a sudden, Canada USA is a very great game to watch. I'll
Yeah.
sit down and watch that too, because it interests me more. It's kind of like a budding rivalry. You being in the forefront with the Canadian Premier League, your background, your family, it's got to be an exciting time for Canadian soccer.
Definitely, and directly or indirectly, I've been part of it. I've been feeling that I've been part of that process. Obviously, number one, because my brother has been involved. Um, he's been in it, so I've seen in front of me what the progress of the first team has been. I was actually at that game in Edmonton, so it's also good to see.
Hope you addressed warmly.
I did, but it's good to see that Canadians think that way now. It's good to see that Canadians are going to look for that home court advantage, and try and play all the cards that they can to make things difficult for other teams, because the reality is it's part of the game. You got to play it that way, and it's not playing dirty. You have fans out in Edmonton as well that want to come see the game. And let me tell you something, it was packed. The night
Yeah.
was definitely magical for everything, from the snow, it was just a magical night. So that progress is there. Obviously, I was with the national team at the World Cup in Qatar. I spent some time with them under Jesse Marsh. Just now, I was invited to be part of the coaching staff over a camp where we played the States in Kansas City, and actually we won that game, and then we tied Mexico in Texas. So it's good to see that on TV you see that the players are there's a rivalry now. It's not just like, oh, we're gonna play Canada. No, there's a rivalry there. Me being on the bench, seeing how intentional every duel was, how intense every duel was, how players got into each other's face. And I caught myself thinking after the game, kind of debriefing my ideas, and I was thinking, this is Canada finally sticking up for itself. Because the reality is, when I looked at both teams, I'm looking at players like my brother that's playing for Porto. You have Jonathan David that's now at Juventus. You have Alfonso Davies that's at Bayern. It's not just your local players playing in the local teams or just in the MLS. You have players now at a very high quality teams in Europe, and that's a big statement. Not only we're having those players that are, now 25, 26, 27, 28, 29-year old, but for someone that obviously follows, and I have to keep my scouts on task, there's a lot of young Canadians at 16, 17, 18, up to that 22 age group that are in big academies and clubs in Europe, and it's great to see. So the progress has been fantastic. I'm extremely happy to be to some extent part of it. And the upcoming years are exciting. Obviously, this is a big year, as you know, having the World Cup and in these three countries that obviously are close to us. And I think it'll be a good opportunity for Canada to say something. I think obviously going to Qatar, scoring their first goal and not being able to point, there's a lot of positives, but you can see that the players are hungry. They have more years of experience. They've been there. They've been at a World Cup, so it's not going to be the first one. And obviously under Jesse, there's that experience, there's that hungeredness, and there's a lot of excited things that are going to be coming here in the next couple of years.
Yeah, when I was doing research on your background, also the coaching, I think you also had the opportunity to be on the coaching staff of the Canadian national team for 2 matches. What were the 2 matches?
It was the U.S.
Okay.
and Mexico. The U.S. and
Oh,
Mexico. So big games. Yeah, big games. Big
yeah,
games.
I would say that those are 2 big games. And if you get the opportunity to be on the sideline to see that, I got to be honest with you, Mauro, that's pretty darn good. That's
Yeah,
actually
no, it
pretty
was
good, darn
good. It
good.
was great.
Yeah, I actually saw Canada play last year. Was where I also saw your brother, who, like we said, plays for Porto, was when they played Argentina in the semifinal. So I
I
got a
was at
chance
that
to
game
play.
too in New
Yeah, so
Jersey.
too bad I didn't know you there soon.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
What I remember about that game was I had been upstairs in the press area and I went down and I think there was like 3 minutes left in the game. And I remember, I think it was like 2-0 at that point, if I remember. But one of the Canadian players came so close to scoring.
Yeah.
And you kind of felt like, everybody was like celebrating. The players had let their guard down. I remember thinking, man, if they scored that goal, because, 2-0, they say, is the worst lead in
It is.
soccer, football. And because then they came back and they had another opportunity. And they had another opportunity. So, yeah, I got a lot of respect. I think Jesse Marsh is the right. I mean, this guy, let's be honest with you, he's not scared to say what's on his mind. And, hey, I think what's going on here with the food and the food poisoning and I hate to say it, sometimes in the culture, you need to be like that. You need to kind
Yeah.
of let people know, like, we're not just happy to be here. We're also here to to be serious. And I think that he's kind of the face of it. And he did a great job. When he came to the New York Red Bulls and replaced a very popular manager named Mike Pecky, he had been, I think, in Montreal first. And then he
Yes.
came in and he did a great job. And obviously the rest is like history. But yeah, Canada is a very interesting story because, like I said, it is growing. I don't even think that they kicked into high gear yet. I mean, America's kind of stalled a little bit. I don't know if that's the proper word. There was all these controversies with the players and the coaches and all that. America at one time, you just felt it was growing and growing and growing, and it feels like something is going. Even though they got the great manager, it feels like it's kind of slowed down a bit, in my opinion. But whereas Canada, you kind of feel like there's some momentum. Like I said, a Canada, Mexico, Canada, USA games. I think those is a great and look. Sometimes when you play Costa Rica, there's another country down there in CONCACAF. I'd be curious to see if CONCACAF ever accepts Greenland. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
that's all
Mm-hmm.
about, and have to take those interesting trips. As a manager, is there any particular manager that you like to say is your style and that you look up to? Is there any, or you do your own thing, or is there a manager out there that you kind of, much in the way an athlete will say, well, I like to play like this player. This is the player that I looked up to growing. You got any role models as a manager?
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously being Portuguese is has been now throwing, in a sense, coaches all over the world, and they've been doing extremely well. And obviously, those are the coaches that um, I would say closer to, because it's my reality. It's the games that I watch. A lot of them start obviously in our Portuguese league, and obviously, and then after that, when they kick off, you keep on following them. So I like to think that us coaches, we don't invent anything. We just steal a bunch of ideas and try to put them together with our little, kind of our sauce on it. So the big one for me, obviously growing up and someone that still today I saw one of his games. I think Jose Mourinho is someone that is extremely unique. Obviously he's someone that I wouldn't say he was the pioneer, because I do think that the pioneer for Portuguese coaches was Carlos Queiroz.
Yeah.
He was someone that obviously, even on the training methodology, he was someone that started off with a lot of new ideas. Obviously, his history, Real Madrid, Manchester United. So he's and for me, he's someone that really pioneered the Portuguese and opened up doors for a lot of us Portuguese coaches. But Mourinho is obviously in the recent history someone that has been there, has done that, and he did touch a lot of different areas that maybe at that time we weren't ready for it, like the psychology. Obviously, he has his masters in that area, and every player that played under Mourinho says that there's something there. He cares about the team, he cares about the individual, and I'm a big believer on that. I think we have to look at players as people and not as players, because they're brought into this world of high performance as first people, and then they become those athletes. So Mourinho's is one for me. Obviously, I play in a 3-4-3. And Ruben Amorim obviously is someone that I quite admire as well, for multiple reasons. The style of play, obviously, when it goes well, and I think it will go well for him here at Manchester, but is something that I quite like. I think as he's very dynamic, he's very direct with what he wants offensively and defensively. And then obviously you have to look at coaches as a whole. I think his communication with socials is fantastic. I think he's quite direct. He's quite he has to be funny when he has to be funny. He has to be mad when he has to be mad. So he's someone, and again, he's not much older than me. So there's that age kind of situation too. And then there's someone that I've liked for the human aspect, for what he's won. He's gone back to houses that he's been extremely successful, and it's Carlo Ancelotti.
Mm.
Just because of what he's won with who he's won. He's come back to Real Madrid, and to a certain extent, and put him back into a high level. A lot of people don't agree with his style of play, but I think he's effective. He's a true gentleman. And obviously in the research and the reports I hear about players of him, I think it's been he's quite unique. So I'd say the moment, obviously, there's a lot more coaches I steal ideas from, and I like. Obviously, it's not kind of these three and that's it. But I'd say those three are mentors. Those three are people that I like to study, and not only what they do on the field, but off the field as well. Because as you know, our job is where we're consistently on the spotlight. If anything that we say outside the lines, we can get criticized, and then that's just part of the job. So it's good to have those mentors to see what they do. But like I said, we steal ideas, or I like to think coaches steal ideas and put in a little bit of their own sauce. And I have that sauce, and I use it as well.
One person I suggest you try to be more like, because I guarantee you'll get a lot more attention. He's become a cult hero in the Portuguese community. And when I say his name, you'll know what I'm talking about. The legendary Ricardo Sá Pinto. I mean,
Yes,
that guy
yes.
is, let me tell you, that guy's, not many people will sign a contract with a club in Iran the day after, a major international incident. I mean, it's just, but not when he was managing Moreirense and they were trying to avoid relegation into the playoff. He was like on the sideline going nuts. And I remember saying, man, if I had the money, this is my manager. Not only because he would get us attention, but he really cares.
Yeah,
And when you're trying to get attention, sometimes you have to be like that. So anyway, just a little bit of fun with
yeah.
say that, because he's kind of, a lot of people I know just love him, and but like I said, he's a big personality, and I thought that was very interesting. Let me ask you also about Portuguese in Canada. Look, there are so many Portuguese in Canada, especially Toronto. The amount of people from, just for this podcast, that come from Canada is one of my bigger audiences, especially Toronto, and that's always been the case with Portuguese soccer.com. And various people over the years have had the chance, if you daydream, to be in the opportunity to actually play in Portugal, regardless whether it's the first division, second, the non-professional division, even down to the districts. I think my club, Atlético dos Arcos, for Marcos Valverde, I think a few years ago they had a Canadian kid on the team. The name escapes me right now. But here in the States, the biggest thing is to play in the NCAA soccer. It's to play at the college level, whether it's Division 1, 2, and 3. There's opportunity there to do that because there's so many colleges and there's a chance to be recruited. Are there a lot of opportunities there in like, are there any Portuguese players that maybe we should know about? I think one or two may have gone to play in Portugal. Or is like you said, some of the teams are trying to start academies. Anybody in Portuguese in Canada we should know about?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of Portuguese Canadians out there, and then obviously in Portugal that I've been following quite closely. There's two brothers that one is at Portimonense and their U23 teams that is doing extremely well. His younger brother, I don't want to say Limianos, but I want to say Limianos. I think
Beautiful
is
Punta
it.
Lima.
Yeah, Ponte Lima. So there is. I mean, we just brought in a Portuguese Canadian, Jesse Costa, that was at Wolfsburg, then went to Corinthians, and now we just brought him into to York United. There is a lot of Portuguese Canadians in Portugal at a very high level. There's a center back that was with York 3 years ago. He was at 16-year-old back then. I actually just played against him when I went to go do preseason. He was on the U23s of Portuguese. Good player. He's 18, 19 right now, and French Canadian. But he's got his parents, or his dad, I believe, is from Angola. So there's that Portuguese influence, and yeah, I mean there is a lot of quality. I think the biggest thing for what I say for young talent that has that possibility, that double passport type of situation, is you got to grind it out. That's just the reality of it. I think a lot of people, and today it's just a little bit of the society too. We look for those quick results. We look to go to Portugal for a year and then all of a sudden start making millions and driving Ferraris, and that's just not the reality. I think when you're serious about something, you understand the process. You go through the process. You understand that there's not only bad days, but there's certainly not only good days, and that's kind of where players have to thrive. I think that consistency of hard work, and I have an example of that at home. Obviously with my brother, and obviously with myself as well. But my brother, obviously now playing at Porto, he's someone that, and it's not, obviously, as you know, it's not very normal to get to the big clubs and not go
Very
through them,
different, yeah.
not go through them in your youth. And my brother was he played at Nazarense, which is a district team from our hometown, obviously with me. We both went to União Leiria. My brother at 16, he was playing against obviously Benfica, Porto, Sporting, but he decided then to leave. I was playing district, basically a men's league, fourth division in Portugal for a year. I told my brother to come play. So he was 16-year-old playing fourth division Portugal. And then from then on, he went to Torriense, which is also U18s. It is a big club, but it's not one of those top clubs, as you know. Their first team at that point was in third division. From there, he went to Leixões, which is a very historical club. Leixões, Chaves, and all this, we're talking about a lot of bad days, a lot of good days, but just consistency of understanding, okay, this is what I have to do, this is how I have to work. So the opportunity is there. There's a lot of opportunities in Portugal, but there's also a lot of players that want to be professionals. And obviously, as you know, football in Portugal is like a religion. There's not much else that kids grow up wanting to do. There's futsal. Handball is also a big sport, but mainly football being the number one. And when you join that culture, when you join that and have those ambitions, you're just another one. So I think it's the consistency, and then really working on a daily basis to reach that end goal is kind of the advice I would give out to anybody that wants to go and go into that Portuguese soccer environment.
Yeah, one thing, by the way, about your brother, like you said, he was with Leixões. I remember him. I was following him. Then he went to Chaves. Then he had a big opportunity to go to Mexico. And then the worst thing happens, the worst luck. he unfortunately hurts his knee. And here's a story for everybody. Not only did he come back from that, he came back to Portugal and now he's playing for Porto.
Yep.
I mean, that is, you talk about an incredible, you talk about the disadvantage of making up. First of all, not many people go to Mexico. I mean, Paulinho of Sporting is tearing it up there, scoring.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember at the time, people were like, man, if he's got a chance to go play in Mexico, maybe if he waits a little bit longer. And I always tell the people, well, that's easy to say that because it's not your decision to make, nor, you also have to think about the finances. And let's be honest with you, sometimes clubs, they're going to kind of urge you along because
Yeah.
a club like Chaves, beautiful place, traz them once. But your brother, I mean, he gets this serious injury and then still manages to turn it around. What did he, after Mexico, he came back to Portugal. Where did he go back in Portugal?
Yeah, so he got his injury at Cruz Azul.
Right.
It was extremely random too. So he was actually, it's just a quick story.
Pre-Anselmi, by the way. That's pre-Anselmi. Let's
Yeah,
just
that was pre
that was
Anselmi,
pre-Anselmi.
but it's actually I'll just hold out the story very quickly here. I was actually watching that game with my mom back home in Portugal. I was off. I was in during my off season, and he was obviously getting his fitness levels up. Obviously, the altitude in Mexico, the humidity. Pedro Caixinha, his coach, is like, listen, I'll put you in slowly, and then you'll start, that following weekend. So they had a cup game on a Wednesday. He came on in the 55th minute, 59th minute. He gets a red card. Not a red card. It goes to VAR. They take the red card away. They get
Yeah,
they give him the yellow, and literally 5 minutes later he tears his ACL. So everything was going so well. He got that injury. He worked day in and day out to recover from that. He did very good job recovering. He still got a couple games for the second team of Cruz Azul while he was doing his recovery. Same situation. He was about to, Caixinha was ready to use him on the weekend. Caixinha gets sacked. They bring Siboldi, and then basically his Cruz Azul days were over. He went back to for me was a club that basically opened their arms for him and really said, listen, you're going to help us as much as we're going to help you. And after Cruz Azul, he went to Paços Ferreira.
Passo, yes.
And it was at Paços Ferreira that, a great club, obviously great historical past. The fans there were fantastic as well. And they really took care of him. And he really enjoyed his time there, obviously up north. And then he had good seasons under Pippa. They went to Europa League. They did very well, and that's when he got this opportunity to first go on loan to Porto for 6 months, and then obviously they bought him and transferred him over.
Yeah, and that's the other thing also is like when you talk about him coming back from the injury and turning his career around and then getting a chance to play for Porto. That's the type of character you need to play for one of the big three in Portugal because, everybody in the locker room, they're teammates and they're going to do all the fun stuff. But at the end of the day, everybody wants to move on to the bigger opportunities. And you got to have that character of coming to practice every day, playing with some of the best players in Portugal and learning how to deal with that adversity. And then, coming in, let's say, whether you start or whether you come in the 70th minute of a 2-2 game, which is unacceptable for a big three, it's not so much about having talent. It's also the mindset. And I think your brother kind of shows that. I think he's done very, very well. And between what you have done and what your brother has it done and being part of that team that made it, I think that's all very good. Let me ask you a question, Mauro. I know you have a lot of friends in Portugal, so every time someone calls, you're going to see that the number's from Portugal. But now one day you get a phone call and you don't recognize the number. Well, who is this? Who's this calling me everybody? And someone picks up the phone. They said, "Hey, Mauro, como é que está? Hey, how you doing? Listen, I deal with this second division club, first division club, third tier club, and we like what you're doing. Tied for second best in the Canadian Premier League offensively. What do you think, man? We heard some good stories about you in Nazaré, and you're bringing your team down. What do you think? Maybe an opportunity in the future. Maybe you like to come to Portugal and manage a club. Is that always a possibility in the future, endeavoring and making sure that's not just your brother that hogs the spotlight in Portugal?"
Yeah, definitely. I think obviously in as you know in football, everybody has a price tag, and then like we've seen coaches being sold for ridiculous amounts of money, and also players as well. But me being Portuguese, obviously growing up there, knowing the league very well, yeah, definitely being having the ability to at some point be a professional coach in Portugal is a dream, just as it was a dream for me to become a professional player. So it's home. It's where my friends and family are. I'm obviously, as you know, I followed the league since I was a little kid. So yeah, if obviously that opportunity comes up, it's something that I obviously have to think about. Right now, I'm extremely focused and extremely thankful for my opportunity here at York. I think we're building something very exciting. It's also good to be part of a blank canvas, which is Canada soccer, and then to be able to mold future athletes, future players, and in this club. So I'm happy here at the moment. Obviously, I have my goals, and we have our goals here as obviously as a club with the ownership and the sporting director that I want to achieve. But who knows in the future? Like I said, Portugal is home, and it would be great to be in those top divisions.
Let me ask you a question. I want to think about a conversation that you would have with your brother. I'm coming this weekend. You got to leave me tickets at the ticket office in Dragon. And by the way, give me 5 minutes to talk to Vilas Boas. Andre Franco goes to Chicago. Ivan Jaime is going to, Montreal. Come on. Anything we can do to get some of those B team players to be playing, over here in Toronto? You ever have that conversation with your brother? Like, come on, man, let's try to get some of these players to come over here to the Canadian Premier League and play for my brother. Obviously, I'm joking, but is that even possible? Like with the league, I know in the early days with MLS, it was very tough to get players. Do you guys get a lot of players on loan in the league? And I apologize if I'm asking something that I should already know, but obviously you're a manager. There's an international market, but is there an international market in the league, or is it mostly just domestic players?
No, it's definitely something that happens. We have obviously similar to MLS. We have obviously our rules. We can only have seven foreigner players, seven internationals, and and we can pretty much get them from anywhere in the world. Currently, there is some Portuguese players in the league. Funny enough, one of them was a player from Porto B, the Diogo Ressurreição. He's at Valor, so it is definitely something that happens. Obviously, I have a lot of connections between coaches and a lot of agents that want to put their players in places where, number one, they can play their football. Number two, they can grow and see different realities. And there's nothing to hide. Number three, obviously, to have some stability on their social life and also on their financial life. And I think obviously, North America gives that. We don't have as many problems as European clubs that have at times, and that's just the reality. So you'd be surprised on how many players from Portugal do want to come here, not only to Canada, but to North America, because it is up and coming, it is growing. And I think, I always say this a lot of the times when I try to convince players to come here. It's you're better off being, the first ones in the pot than wanting to come into the pot being full. So there is opportunities. Obviously, we had a player here with us from Tondela. He already left and went back to Portugal. He's playing third division right now. But yeah, it's something that happens. It's something that is going to continue to happen because we do have those roster spots, and we do want to bring quality from abroad.
When is your next game? Tell us a little bit for the people that are listening. Obviously, people have heard about the league. Let's go in a little bit more in depth. When is your next game? What's the best places to buy tickets? Give me the whole background on that.
Yeah, so we're in a tight race, obviously in the league between third and fifth place. Basically, everybody's 1-2 points away from each other. We're playing our next home game this Sunday against Pacific, so it'll be a good one. It'll be an afternoon kickoff, which is great to have obviously friends and family and make it an event. Obviously, tickets is either on our club website or on our socials. They have all that information out there. We're 9 games away now from the end of the season. After that, we'll go into playoffs. So it's good games to be able to come and watch live, because again, it's crunch time, and you know how important playoffs are for each and every franchise. And then we want to be the top guns in the league. So we're going to continue to push finish as high as we can. Because the reality is, as the higher we finish, the more possibilities we have to go on a run in the playoffs. So the boys are hungry, the boys are motivated, and we have a game at home. And again, our house is our home's a fortress, and we want to win every game at home.
Yeah, well, I wish you the very best of luck. I've been following the progress. Again, Mauro Eustaquio, obviously the youngest first team manager in North America. And by the way, that says a lot because there is a lot of clubs in North America. It's more clubs in North America than there is in Portugal, to be honest with you. So I want to congratulate you. You were a player. Now you're transitioning to a coach. You're having a lot of success. You're in one of the biggest cities in North America. I mean, Toronto. I love Toronto. Toronto is like another New York, except maybe a little bit cheaper, which is why it's so attractive. I just think, to be doing what you do, on the cusp of what I think is a fantastic time going on now in Canadian soccer. And if you're listening to this and you haven't had a chance to check out a game, you want to take your kid, look, you can always watch RTP International, one of the big three play. There's always opportunity to go to, go to the Casa de Benfica or the Porto Club, I think is on Yonge Street. I forgot the name of the street. Used to be together. I remember a few years ago, they were separated by like one building. I always say this to the same thing, like what I say about back in Portugal. Obviously we're dominated by the first division. The newspapers are dominated by the first divisions. But if you go to Portugal, support the local club, just like you should support the local club in your city if it's not in Portugal. And you have and there's a lot of Portuguese. Go to the game, dress up in your best Porto, Benfica, Sporting, Tundela, whatever it may be, and go at the end of the day. But inflation is very bad these days, people. You probably would save a lot of money than going to a restaurant and spending, $100 for like 4 people. But congratulations with all your success. Keep it going. And again, I'm sure we're just going to hear nothing but great things. Your family's name, between you and your brother are certainly in the forefront. And we obviously wish, although a lot of people are listening to this now, they say, no, we're not going to wish Porto any luck. What the hell with them? Who cares? But obviously, like I always say, if somebody is Portuguese, wherever they may be, we wish them, nothing but the best. And obviously, like you said, football or soccer, I like to say both because we say soccer here. It's very passionate. People are very passionate with that, and the Portuguese are at the top of the list. My only thing sometimes with Portuguese, what I do here with the podcast is I had a reporter on, David Novo, the executive editor of the Record, and I always joke around with him because sometimes I think Portuguese football is too much about selling players. I get the attractiveness of it, but, I always say this, and so many people come up to me and they say, you're so right. But here's what Portuguese football has become. A young player has a great game. He scores in a Clásico. He scores in a Derby. He scores in a League Cup semifinal. The next day, he will be linked with all the best countries in Europe. The only guy that didn't get that treatment from the media this past year was Quaresma when he scored that great goal for Sporting in Alvalade. And all he gets the next day in the newspaper is he declined an offer from a club in the Bundesliga. That's the only bad guy I feel. I want to stick up for Quaresma. I don't know the guy. But that's what Portuguese football has become. But at the end of the day, everybody roots for the Portuguese. And, again, I want to congratulate you for being on the forefront of it in Canada. I wish the league the best of luck, your continued growth. It's not easy. It's not an easy job. Just because you're doing something you like doesn't mean that it's easy. And again, Mauro, I thank you for your time. You gave me more than, I appreciate your time. I know you're a very busy guy. Sometimes when we communicate to set this up, I saw that you were answering me at like 6 in the morning. I'm like, oh, this guy's an early bird. Like, wow, that for me, I'm only getting into REM sleep at that. I'm only like just, kind of like digging in, but I appreciate this. And like I said, I've had Mark dos Santos on a few years ago. Where is Mark these days? I know last I remember, he was at Vancouver.
Yeah, Mark was at Vancouver, and then he left that job, and now he's the assistant coach at LA FC. He's been there. Good. He's been there now for I want to say 3 years, and obviously, as you know, they've been extremely successful. And Mark also has a brother coaching in our league, Phil dos Santos. He's with Valor. So that family has been doing well in the sporting world as well.
You know what I liked about Mark is when I interviewed him, he said one thing that I thought was very interesting, and perhaps maybe behind the scenes you say that. He goes, When we were always, I was asking him, like, does he look after players? Like, we had a Portuguese player in MLS, Pedro Santos, who had a great
Yeah.
career with Columbus. He was at DC United last I remember. And I even had Pedro on my show, and he kind of said the same thing, although he was trying to be respectful, is you're going to get paid every 2 weeks here in North America. There's a reality to what goes on. My club, Atlético dos Arcos, which, again, anyone listens to this, I always end my podcast talking about it. They went under like 7-8 years ago. They made a run in the Taça de Portugal. They made it as far as the quarterfinals. They lost to Nacional, who had a manager named Manuel Machado. If you remember, he was always either Nacional manager or Vitoria Guimarães manager. He was always either one. And unfortunately, after that year, actually they lost in PKs. The next match, they would have played Vilas Boas in this one season with all those players in the Dragão. The sorteio had it, and they lost. It was the only time I ever saw them play on Sport TV. I'll never forget that, and it was it was a lot of fun.
That's class,
and a lot of times to watch it. But that was a lot of fun to see my Atlético dos Arcos. But hopefully, now they're known as Atlético. Well, they were known as Atlético Valverde. Now they're known as Atlético dos Arcos. But there's a story with every listener I have here. Somebody likes their small club. Somebody knows somebody. And again, that's what I try to do here. And I want to thank you this week for coming on and giving me your perspective, Nazaré, the Canadian Premier League, your team and the great career you're having. Your brother, we continue to wish him the best of luck. Yes, everybody in this podcast should be wishing him the best of luck. Although I know in 2 weeks, some people will not be wishing him the best of luck.
That's true.
But I think one of the things I also learned about this podcast was, you gotta, it's not easy. You need to work hard. You need to be at the right place at the right time. And, it's something. So I want to thank you for everything you've told us about Canadian soccer. And again, I just continue to wish you the very best of luck with everything you're doing up there.
No, I appreciate it, John. And again, thank you for the invitation. It's always nice to connect with people that, number one, care about the sport, and obviously continue to share big experiences, great stories. And obviously, having that Portuguese background means a lot to me. I'm someone that, left the country at a young age, and my parents as well, but left the country at a young age to follow a dream. And it's good to connect people with people that have the same passion. And obviously, like we said earlier today, soccer is a religion, football is a religion back home. And if we can transfer that out here and show our passion and continue to grow the sport out here, I think we're both doing our piece. And again, congratulations on the podcast, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, if you go back to Portugal next year, maybe I'll bring you on before that. We could talk a little bit about it, and then we could get a lot of people to be following the team in Portugal.
There you go.
I'll try to bring you back on next year. Thank you so much for your time. I know you got a lot on your plate. We wish you the best of luck down the final stretches of the 8 to 9 matches. Again, like I always say on this podcast, wherever you are, whatever country you are, we want the best because you're holding the Portuguese flag, in your case, in Toronto, where there's a lot of Portuguese. And I encourage people, if they haven't had a chance to check it out, get on the metro. I've been to York. I know the campus. It's a very big campus. I actually stayed there once, because when I went to booking.com to find a hotel, it was like the cheapest I could find. And other than not having a TV in the room, I felt like I was back in college. But I thought that was pretty cool. But if you get a chance, go check out the games, the matches. Hey, it's soccer, it's football, it's intense, it's people that want to win, and I just think it would be a lot of fun. So if you're listening and you're looking for an idea in the future, I encourage you to, go check out the team, and I wish you the best of luck. And folks, we're going to wrap up episode 286. My interview here tonight was Mauro Eustaquio, Portuguese manager, Canadian, played in Portugal, of course, managing York United FC of the Canadian Premier League. His brother's doing great things at Football Club de Porto. And we also had an opportunity to talk about the rising times that are going on in Canada. So as always, please take care of yourselves, folks, and I'll talk to you next week. Ciao, everybody.